Hey guys, it's Jeremiah here, and today on Dad Projects, I'm going to be going over what happened to this garden and the steps that I'm going to take to fix it. So let's go ahead and assess the damage. So this large thing here is actually kale, and these spiky things are the pods. The pods have already dispersed and the seeds are everywhere, so I'll be growing kale for the foreseeable future whether I want to or not. And next we've got, this is actually celery that has now gone to flower. I'm going to go ahead and leave this alone today because it attracts a ton of bees. So I'm not going to prune this at all. Now this here is some very sad looking lettuce plants. Hopefully I could revive those. And this is probably one of the scrawniest tomato plants I've ever seen. It does have some flowers, but we need to prune this and hopefully we can revive it. Now it's not all doom and gloom. This is another raised bed that I have. This is actually the first video that I ever made, and as you can see, this garden is actually not struggling at all. I've got a lot of pepper plants in here, and the layer of mulch is pretty thick, but it is keeping the moisture in, and I expect to have a really good harvest for this, and it hasn't gotten a whole lot of love either, but it's doing really well all by itself. This just goes to show you how effective these types of raised beds are. Now I'm planting my squash in a separate bed just because these things take up so much space. And these are doing really well despite my summer squash having some sort of powdery mildew, or maybe it is a fungus on the leaves. I'm going to go ahead and spray that with some neem oil. Hopefully that takes care of it and it doesn't spread. The other problem is some of these squash do seem to have a little bit of blossom and rot, which is usually indicates some sort of calcium deficiency. I'm not thinking it's a pollinator problem. I do have lots of bees on these things every single day, and there's one right there too. So back to this bed, I'm going to go ahead and start by pruning down this kale, all the way down to the root ball actually. I'm going to go ahead and leave the root ball intact too. I want to see if this kale is actually going to come back in the fall or so, and I'll keep you guys updated on that. Now you're probably wondering why this garden is in such bad shape, and the answer to that is a little bit of equipment failure and a whole lot of neglect. Now I like to use a water timer connected to my soaker hose to water the garden, but what I didn't realize was my water timer batteries actually died and it didn't turn on the water for almost 2 weeks. The other problem was I actually had a water hose busted, so when the water did turn on, it actually just leaked out for the side, and I made a different video of that. And then I also come to find out my soaker hose was also cracked. Now soaker hoses are supposed to leak water uniformly. If you've got one with a crack in it, most of the water ends up leaking at that area and the rest of the hose doesn't leak any water. So for the tomatoes, I'm actually going to prune off some of these dead and diseased leaves, and I'm also going to prune off any flowers and any fruits that are starting to grow. Since I need to refertilize this thing, it can't do both. It can't grow leaves and grow fruit at the same time. Now that I've got all my plants pruned up properly, I'm going to go ahead and peel back this layer of mulch. And now herein lies a pretty big problem. Mulch is really important. It does keep your soil from drying out too fast, but when you have mulch too thick, it actually reduces the amount of oxygen that roots can get. And yes, the roots do need oxygen. So I'm going to go ahead and break up this soil so I can add some fertilizer, and I'm adding kind of a all-purpose fertilizer mixed in with some Epsom salt. Hopefully this is going to aerate the soil, give it some extra nutrients, and get these plants growing again. And I'm going to go ahead and repeat this process amongst all the plants. And when I'm done, I'm going to add a heavy dose of water to all of them. I'm going to let that water recede a little bit and water it again. Now I do have some extra space in the garden, so I'm going to go ahead and plant a spare pepper plant that I've got lying around. I figured it can't get too much worse than this, so might as well just try and grow some more plants. Now here's another problem that I'm having with this garden. It's kind of hard to tell, but I'm running into a lot of roots while I'm trying to dig this hole. And these roots aren't from any of the plants that I'm growing, they're actually from my neighbor's tree. And this is a problem when you have an in-ground garden, is you can end up getting roots from all sorts of things trying to get the nutrients from your vegetables. Once I've got the hole dug out for this, I'm going to go ahead and fill up that hole with water. Then I'm going to wait until that water recedes before I plant this last pepper. And I'm also going to go ahead and fertilize with the exact same mixture I've been using for everything. Now the silver lining to this day is actually this little potato plant. I didn't even plant this, I actually planted potatoes last year. And it did yield a pretty small harvest that I managed to get after I broke my little tool, but it's still nice to get something today. Alright guys, so that's it for today. Now I'm done pruning and fertilizing these plants. And if you're curious why I had to prune them, plants often decide whether or not they're going to use the nutrients to grow fruit or grow foliage and become larger plants. So by snipping off the fruit and the buds and the flowers, that forces it to use the nutrients to become larger plants. So I'm hoping that will happen, and I'll keep updating you guys on what happens with this garden. This is actually the worst that I've ever had. I've actually created this garden bed about 7 years ago, and I've never had it this bad. And there's a couple things that happened. Unfortunately, life got in the way, and I'm sure I'm not the only one. This happens to a lot of people, and if it does happen to you, just stay calm, ask your friends, figure out what to do, fix it, and move forward.